think this is part 4 of chapter 1. And the last thing I was stating is to go watch Path to Freedom's video, TDA 2.0 Q&A, as she expounds on how corporate funds are really unlimited, unlike what this is saying. Anyways, the corporate social audit. It has been suggested that corporate audits should be extended to include not only audits of the financial health of a corporation, but also its moral health. The audit would examine how well employees have adhered to the company's code of ethics and how well the corporation has met its duty of social responsibility. Such audits would focus on the corporation's efforts to promote employment opportunities for members of protected classes, worker safety, environmental protection, consumer protection, and the like. To provide the requisite independence between the auditor and the company, social audits should be conducted by outside firms. Social audits are not easy. First, it may be hard to conceptualize just what is being audited. Second, it may be difficult to measure results. Despite these factors, more companies are expected to undertake social audits. A matter of ethics. Where there's smoke, there's ... Human beings have smoked tobacco products for hundreds of years. Tobacco has been used in ceremonies by Native Americans and in other cultures. Today, about 1/4 of the adult population of the United States smokes. This percentage is even greater in many other countries. For several decades, however, cigarette smoking has been under constant attack by doctors, health professionals, non-smokers, and others. In 1964, the Surgeon General of the United States issued a report that identified the dangers of smoking. Current statistics estimate that over 1,000 people die each day from the direct effects of cigarette smoking, and over 50,000 non-smokers die annually from secondhand smoke. Congress enacted the Federal Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act in 1965. The original act required the following warning label to be placed on cigarette packages. Caution: cigarette smoking may be hazardous to your health. In 1969, Congress changed the warning to the following: Warning: the Surgeon General has determined that cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. In 1984, Congress again changed the warning. One of the following four warning labels must be placed on each cigarette package after the words Surgeon General's warning. Number 1, smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. Number 2, cigarette smoke contains carbon monoxide. Number 3, quitting smoking now greatly reduces serious risks to your health. Number 4, smoking by pregnant women may result in fetal injury, premature birth, and low birth weight. Now, I stopped smoking almost 2 years ago after smoking off and on for 30-something years, I guess. Beside my own theories, because I've known a lot of people that have, or I won't say a lot, but I know people who have developed cancer, including lung cancer, that have never smoked a day in their life. So that's always interesting to me. Anyways, large manufacturers must rotate the warnings every quarter. Are the warnings sufficient? Should they prevent smokers who are injured from smoking from suing the cigarette companies to collect for their injuries? These issues were raised in the case of Cipollone versus Liggett Group, Inc. Rose Cipollone was born in 1925 and began smoking at the age of 17. She smoked Chesterfield brand cigarettes manufactured by Liggett Group, Inc. until 1955. In her deposition, Mrs. Cipollone testified that she smoked the Chesterfield brand to be glamorous, to imitate the pretty girls and movie stars depicted in Chesterfield advertisements, and because the advertisements stated that Chesterfield cigarettes were mild. She stated that she understood the description of Chesterfield cigarettes as mild to mean that they were safe. Mrs. Cipollone also testified that she was an avid reader of a variety of magazines, frequently listened to the radio, and often watched television during the years she smoked the Chesterfield brand. Chesterfield advertisements appeared continuously in those media during that period. Several of these advertisements were introduced into evidence. Mrs. Cipollone had seen many of these advertisements. Television advertisements for the Chesterfield brand were also introduced into evidence. The Chesterfield cigarette was advertised as being manufactured with excuse me, a Chesterfield cigarette was advertised as being manufactured with electronic miracle technology that makes cigarettes more better and safer for you. Mrs. Cipollone testified that she frequently listened to the radio show. Oh, actually, pause. That makes me think of vaping and how history just repeats itself. Because I remember when vaping first came around, it was advertised as being better for you than smoking tobacco. Um, and of course, it's a matter of opinion because they say smoking altogether is unhealthy. I'm just thinking. But yeah, crazy how history repeats itself. Mrs. Cipollone testified that she frequently listened to the radio show Arthur Godfrey and His Friends, sponsored by the Chesterfield brand. The Chesterfield brand was marketed by the show as follows. Text read by Mr. Godfrey. You hear stuff all the time about cigarettes are harmful to you and this and that and the other thing. If you smoke it, will make you feel better. Really. What? Another advertisement read by Mr. Godfrey stated, but they're good, very fine, and I never recall seeing anybody's gravestone. He smoked too much. Did you? I never did. So Chesterfield's for you. In 1955, Mrs. Cipollone stopped smoking Chesterfield cigarettes and began to smoke L&M filter cigarettes, also made by Liggett. In response to a question as to why she switched to the L&M brand, Mrs. Cipollone stated, well, they were talking about the filter tip, that it was milder and a miracle. It would keep the stuff inside the trap. When asked why she desired the filter tip, she testified that it was the new thing and I figured, well, go along. It was better. The bad stuff would stay in the filter then. She also stated that the filter would filter the nicotine and the tar. She concluded, through advertising, I was led to assume that they were safe and they wouldn't harm me. Evidence was also introduced as to how the L&M brand was marketed during the years that Mrs. Cipollone smoked that brand. One series of advertisements that appeared on television and in magazines stated that L&M Miracle Tip filters were just what the doctor ordered. The Miracle Tip was advertised as removing the heavy particles, leaving you a light and mild smoke. In 1968, Mrs. Cipollone stopped smoking the L&M brand and started smoking the Virginia Slims brand, manufactured by Philip Morris Inc. She stated she switched because it was very glamorous and very attractive ads, and it was a nice-looking cigarette that persuaded me. In the 1970s, Mrs. Cipollone switched to Parliament brand, also manufactured by Philip Morris. She testified that this brand was advertised as having a recessed filter, and she thought this made it healthier. In 1974, she changed from Parliament to the True brand. a cigarette manufactured by Lorillard Inc. and advertised as low in tar. From 1942 until the early 80s, Mrs. Cipollone smoked between 1 and 2 packs of cigarettes per day. In 1981, Mrs. Cipollone was diagnosed as having lung cancer. Even though her doctors advised her to quit smoking, she was unable to do so. Mrs. Cipollone continued to smoke until June 1982 when her lung was removed. Even after that, she smoked occasionally in secret. She testified that she was addicted to cigarette smoking and that it was terribly difficult for her to give it up. She stopped smoking in 1983 after her cancer had spread widely and she had become terminally ill. On August 1st, 1983, Mrs. Cipollone and her husband Antonio filed a complaint against the manufacturers of the cigarettes she smoked. Mrs. Cipollone alleged that as a result of smoking the defendant's cigarettes for almost 40 years, she sustained personal injuries. Her husband sought compensation for loss of consortium. Mrs. Cipollone died on October 21st, 1984, but her husband continued to prosecute the action, individually and as executor of his wife's estate. So notice that they named the damages, that she sustained personal injuries, and her husband sought compensation for loss of consortium. So let's look up what that is. And we're almost done with this chapter, y'all. Loss of consortium. Loss of consortium is a legal term in tort law that refers to the loss of benefits from a family relationship due to injuries caused by a tortfeasor. The term consortium refers to the association and fellowship between two married people. In Washington, loss of consortium is often a standalone claim filed by a close family member of an accident victim, such as a spouse, parent, or child. The claim alleges that the injuries suffered by the loved one have affected the love, affection, guidance, and availability that the relatives once shared. All right. The defendants asserted that the warnings on the cigarette packages preempted Mrs. Cipollone's state tort lawsuit against them for the period that the warnings were required. Definition of preempted.
Here's the definition of preempt. Take action in order to prevent an anticipated event from happening or stall.
So preempt is take action in order to prevent an anticipated event from happening or stall, or to acquire or appropriate something in advance. They also allege that Mrs. Cipollone assumed the risk of smoking all of the cigarettes sold to her. Liggett stated in the documents filed with the court. Each individual makes the personal cost-utility determination when he chooses to smoke. As an example, Mrs. Cipollone smoked cigarettes because she enjoyed them. Moreover, Mrs. Cipollone made her decision with full knowledge of the reports purporting to show that cigarette smoking caused various adverse health effects, which information had been a matter of common knowledge years before the Surgeon General's Committee issued its report in 1964. The defendants sought a protective order stating that any information uncovered in this case regarding the dangers of smoking could not be used in related or similar cases. They also asked permission to introduce evidence concerning how the economic benefits of the cigarette industry balance the health risk it causes. Liggett stated, The cigarette industry is a major contributor to the nation's economy. The industry provides thousands of jobs in manufacturing and in sales. Moreover, thousands of farm families derive their livelihood from their tobacco crop. Cigarettes are an important export and, as such, have a favorable impact upon the nation's balance of trade. And, of course, the industry contributes substantially to the public fisc by way of its payments of federal, state, and local taxes. This case raises many issues. Do the cigarette manufacturers meet their duty under any of the ethical theories discussed earlier in this chapter? Do the cigarette manufacturers act socially responsible under any of the theories discussed earlier in this chapter? Do the warnings legally absolve cigarette manufacturers of liability for injuries suffered by smokers? Is it ethical for executives and shareholders of cigarette companies to make money off the production and sale of cigarettes? Should universities divest themselves of investment in cigarette manufacturers? And outside of the case problems, that's the end of chapter 1. So what do y'all think? It's this is what maybe the third company mentioned in this chapter. We had Lockheed, I'm forgetting the second one. Oh, the Ford Motor Company, and now Leggett. And both Ford and Leggett are stressing how they are helping by providing jobs, jobs, and how the tobacco industry, this is key to me. Cigarettes are an important export and, as such, have a favorable impact on the nation's balance of trade. So they're talking about how it affects the world. Not only that, but and of course the industry contributes substantially to the to the public fisc, which probably means the public debt, by way of its payment of federal, state, and local taxes.